Hi, my name is Savannah. This is my reflection for my Writer's Craft course. So the editing process for my final piece was an interesting one just because poetry I find is a different type of editing than a short story might be. The person that edited mine in the classroom did a really good job of pointing out changes in some of my titles, adding commas and periods, which I went through and did afterwards. I think she had a great point about some of the sentences having more of an emphasis if you end it with a period. So I went back through and I did that because when I was reading my poems to myself, I definitely added emphasis on certain lines, but to be able to communicate that to the audience, you have to use some grammar and punctuation. So that was a really great suggestion, and I was really happy about who edited mine. For myself, my editing process was kind of just writing lots and lots of poetry and then taking out the ones I wasn't liking very much. Sometimes I would have an idea of what I wanted to convey in a poem, and I would write multiple and then take out whichever ones didn't flow properly or didn't quite sound right, and then leave the one that did sound right to me. I feel like poetry is also one of those types of writing that comes from the heart, so even if the poem wasn't exactly perfect, that's okay, I think, because you're trying to convey emotion, you're trying to communicate a feeling, so if they didn't have the exact right word, I think that's okay in poetry. So I just kind of wrote a lot of them and then picked the one that I felt was the best. The suggestions I find helpful, I told you the girl that did mine was really great. The suggestions about the commas and the periods and the changing of some of the titles were great. Unfortunately, the title that I had written, I did change. Originally, I started off as a love story when I had the idea of the poem, but it kind of changed the series. The series kind of changed as I wrote it, and I wanted to do more of a transformation of a character. So it changed from a love story, then I crossed out the love, and then I wrote of a girl who became a woman, and then I finally decided on a love story with the love crossed out, and then so it's a story of a girl who learned about love, because I think that represents the series the best. I didn't reject any of her suggestions. She wasn't very specific about some of them. A lot of the times it was just go through and change those grammar areas. I added the 2, changed it from 1-0 to 2 in the other area, and I did change the title to First Touch. I think that's a great suggestion instead of Gasp. So personal biases of this piece, I actually had to talk to people about certain experiences they have had, just talking to people about relationships and how they had felt in certain times, and I went through, I read some other, I looked at photos. Actually, there was one photo, I talked about the trees and the rocks, and I had just seen this photo of a couple in a forest area, and I was like, wow, nature is a really interesting comparison with love and everything. So that's kind of where that one came from. My personal biases, I guess, just experiences, being with people, and there's love, and also being heard, and and then also being okay afterwards, realizing, oh, I'm all right, I went through this and I'm okay now. So I think that every time you write something, there's personal biases through it. I think some of the values that I tried to come through is at the end, although she had gone through a lot, she was okay with herself, and she loved herself, and I think that was a message that I wanted to convey and through what I wrote, because I think that's a message that should always be conveyed through everything that you write. Although there can be hurt, there's a healing, which is a whole section in the series. There is healing after the hurt, right? And after the love and after the desire, there is a healing process, which I think was important. And then how this piece represents my growth, I never would have thought that I'd be able to write a series. I had never written poetry before this class, so I think the fact that after everything, I would have felt more comfortable writing a short story or a children's book or a script, but I kind of pushed myself and I was like, no, you know what, I really enjoyed writing poetry in the unit, and I thought, let's have my final performance task be a poetry piece. So I just kind of would take time every day and see where my mind would take me with that, and it turned out, I think in my opinion, really good. I let some other people read it, and they really enjoyed it, and they also, I think, noticed, like, when I first started with the poetry, I was very only comfortable doing the very structured pieces, and I had a couple of the structured pieces in there just to show that I do understand the structure of poetry, and but I also wrote a lot of free verse, and that was something that, you know, shows that I'm more comfortable with the language, I'm more comfortable with how it should flow and what it should sound like, and I think that represents that with practice, you become more confident, and that ends up making it sound even better. I wrote one of the poems I wrote at the beginning, and it was a different, like, perspective, and I wrote just like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and I went down and counted, and although, you know, it was a poem, and I'm happy that I did that, it was very simple. It was just her sitting in the grass and looking around, and oh, there's 2 caterpillars, and there's 1 butterfly, and like, yes, it was an interesting poem, but this showed a lot more emotion, it showed a lot more feeling, it had a whole story behind it, as well as being interesting to read, so I think it was definitely a large progression of what I'm capable of, and I really enjoyed it, so I definitely will continue to write. So yeah, my growth as a writer, like, this course has been, like, incredible. I think this is the most I've improved in, like, any class I've ever done. So I'm really happy that I took it, and I definitely will be taking, like, writing courses in university, so I'm really happy that I was able to grow with this course. Thank you very much.